All right, welcome back everyone. So in this part of the lesson, we will continue discussing how to read effectively. What are the best ways to read effectively? Now, as I said in the previous lesson, we are going to go into more detail at this time. So we're going to start with how should we read in details. Now, let's start with common mistakes. What are some common mistakes that many of the students do when they are doing reading? So firstly, what I come across in my classes is some students say, I check and learn all unknown words before reading the text. So some students really they sit down and underline all the vocabulary items that they don't know before reading the text. They look up in a dictionary for their meaning, okay? And then they start doing the reading. This is a common mistake, everyone. You should not be doing this. First of all, you don't need all the vocabulary items in that text. Secondly, guessing from guessing the meaning from the context is a very useful strategy to learn when you are doing reading. And this is very, very tiring, everyone. If you use this strategy, you will get tired and you will get bored after some time. All right. For this reason, I strongly recommend against checking all and learning all unknown vocabulary words, vocabulary items before reading the text. Okay. Secondly, some students say, Teacher, I read quickly because usually I'm under time pressure, or if I read slowly, I get bored. Now, this is something we should avoid, everyone, because this is too superficial. You need to be able to go into detail when you are doing reading. So, reading very quickly is not a very good idea. And on the opposite side, some students say, I translate or I analyze every sentence after finishing reading. So let's say you finished the reading text, okay? You answered all the questions, okay? Multiple choice questions, for instance. Some students go back to the text and translate every sentence or analyze every sentence one by one. This is too detail oriented, and again, it's not a good idea, all right? But then, so these are some common mistakes that many of the students do actually, so you should not be doing these. But what should you be doing then, all right? So, so how should we read? Let's focus on this point then. So you want to benefit the most from reading. How can you do this? First of all, you need to read twice or three times. Now, in your own language, usually you read once, okay? But in another language, in a foreign language, when you're learning a foreign language, my advice to you is to read at least twice and maximum three times. But how are we going to do this? Okay. So in the first reading, what are we going to concentrate on in the first reading? In the first reading, while you are doing the first reading, your purpose is to understand the main idea and the organization of the text. So in the first reading, you don't read in detail. You read in order to understand the main idea and in order to understand the organization of the text, okay, during the first time. And your method is scanning quickly. Really, you put the text in front of you, okay? You look at the text and you scan the text or skim the text quickly and go over the text in a couple of minutes, not in a long time, all right? In a very short time, you scan the text, you understand the main idea, of the text and you understand the organization. Sometimes there will be many paragraphs, like there will be 4 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs in one text. Then you understand the main idea of each paragraph, all right? And if there are multiple paragraphs, then you need to focus on the first and last sentences of paragraphs, because usually main idea of a paragraph is given in the first and in the last sentence of that paragraph. All right. So if you read the first paragraph and the last, if you read the first sentence and the last sentence of a paragraph, you will understand the main idea. You will understand the text organization. All right. So your method is scanning quickly and concentrating more on the first and the last sentences of each paragraph. All right. And during the first reading, you do not use a dictionary. You never use a dictionary, everyone, unless it is absolutely necessary. Sometimes, for instance, the topic itself. What is the text about? Okay, the text is about, let's say, a technical stuff, all right? If it's on a technical thing, if it's on a technical stuff, then you can use a dictionary to check the meaning of that specific word only, okay? But you should not check anything else, all right? So you are not using a dictionary at this point. What about second reading? How about second reading? All right. Now, in during the second reading, your purpose is to understand details this time and answer questions. So only during the second reading are you going to, or you are going to more details. You are concentrating on more details during the second reading. And what's your method then? Your method is actually going to the questions first, looking at the questions, and from the questions, you go back to the text, find the corresponding part, find the part that answers the question in the text, and read that part in great detail. So from the question, you read the question, you understand the question in detail, and then go back to the text and read that part in detail. All right? And at this point, now dictionary is allowed. You can use a dictionary at this point. All right? And if you're allowed to use a dictionary, how many words should you look up in the dictionary when you are doing detailed reading? Now, this part of reading is called detailed reading, everyone, because in the second reading, you read in detail, all right? And in second reading, you are allowed, you can use a dictionary. But just be careful, everyone. You need to be using, you need to be looking up for only 10 to 12 words maximum. And this is the maximum, okay, per text. If it's a long text, then you can look up for 10 to 12 words. But sir, which words? I mean, I don't know which words should I look up. Now, there are two important points here. First one is your key, first one is the keywords, everyone. So if you're saying to yourself, in order for me to be able to answer this question, I have to learn the meaning of this word, then you can check the meaning of that word, okay? But that word only. Also, you will see that some words are repeated again and again in the text, all right? Or let's say you are reading a text on environment today, okay? And you're reading another text on environment tomorrow, the next day. And same words appear again and again. Even if you can guess the meanings of those words from context, it's a good idea actually to check the meanings of repeated words in a dictionary, everyone. So you are checking the meanings of two types of vocabulary items in a dictionary. If it's a keyword, if it makes it's impossible, if it makes it impossible for you to answer a question, then you can check that word. And if a vocabulary item is repeated again and again across different texts, then you can check the meaning of the, or you should actually check the meaning of that word. All right. So I hope this part is clear, everyone. In the second reading, we read in detail, we look at the questions, and we go back to the text to find where the answer to that question is, and we read that part in detail by using dictionary. Okay. So, what about third reading? I mean, third reading is rather optional. You don't have to do a third reading, okay? But one thing is very, very important. You need to analyze, everyone, why incorrect answers were wrong. Of course, among the questions, you will have some wrong answers, okay? You have to go back to the question and you have to go back to the text to analyze why they were wrong, okay? You learn most from your mistakes, everyone. You learn from your mistakes, so you have to, they cannot they cannot go unchecked, okay? You need to check your mistakes from a dictionary and then correct them, all right? So that's that, all right? So you learn from your mistakes, so you analyze why your incorrect answers are wrong. And if you need, you should actually get help from others. So this question is wrong. Question number 3 is wrong. I go back to the text, I analyze the text, but I still have no idea why it is wrong. Then you can ask AI, you can ask a friend who knows English, okay? You can ask a teacher. You need to really go ahead and learn why that question was wrong because this is so important. We learn from our mistakes, everyone, all right? When you're learning a language. And purpose number 2, this is something I strongly recommend, okay? In some texts, or in many texts actually, there will be a couple of sentences that are really difficult to understand. You read again and again and again, but still that specific sentence is so difficult you cannot understand it. Then you go back to the text, find these sentences, find two, three sentences that are really difficult to understand. And you analyze those sentences in terms of grammar, maybe in terms of vocabulary, okay? And then when you understand that sentence, when you say, oh, this is what it means here in this text, you can move on, okay? But this is really optional. If you can find such sentences, you can always analyze them in third reading, okay? But really, again, you need to concentrate on two or three challenging sentences only. Focusing on too many sentences will be boring, okay? And it will be too tiring. So just two or three challenging or difficult sentences, and that's it, okay? All right. I hope this one was clear, everyone. In third reading, we analyze our incorrect answers and we analyze a couple of difficult sentences during third reading. Now, there are some other. So we said you need to do at least twice or maybe three times. You need to read the texts, okay? But there are also some other important reading principles, okay? First one is you should not overwhelm yourself with vocabulary. This is so important, everyone. We do not do reading in order to learn vocabulary. Reading itself is very precious, very important, very significant for us. We do reading to read, okay, not to learn vocabulary. So you should not be really overwhelming yourself with vocabulary. You need to spend a maximum of 45 minutes per text. And I'm talking about long texts here. If you're reading a long text, it needs to take a maximum of 45 minutes, if possible, less, okay? It's always important to remember two properly studied texts are better than one overanalyzed text. Okay? Some people analyze a text a little too much, everyone. This is not a good idea. You need to expose yourself to as much reading as possible. For this reason, read more instead of reading in too much detail. Okay? But we will talk about this in more detail in the next slide. What do I mean by this? Balancing, everyone, quantity with depth. These are two different sides, okay? Some readers concentrate too much on quantity. What does this mean? Quantity means number of texts. Some people want to read many, many texts, okay? And some learners want to read in too much detail. They want to analyze one text in so much detail. Now, people, we need to find a balance, a good balance between these two. What does this mean? They are both equally important, everyone. They are equally important. If you analyze something too much, you lose your motivation. Okay? You lose your motivation. It reduces motivation. You get bored. Okay? And then you don't want to do more reading. And it's kind of discouraging and frustrating. So overanalyzing is not a good idea. On the other hand, reading too superficially, reading in no detail, it reduces remembering. Okay, you cannot remember well if you read too superficially. All right, so you need to find a balance between these two when you are doing reading. Not overanalyzing, not skipping too fast. Okay. I think so far, you have had a very clear idea about how to read a text. Now you can go to the market, find a good reading book to study for TOEFL, and you can read as effectively as possible, hopefully. Okay. Now that we have covered this, we can take a short break, everyone. And after the short break, we're going to start with the first part of the TOEFL test, which is complete the words part. We're going to have a quick look at this part and we're going to continue with practice. Let's take a break, everyone, and see you after the break.